Dr. Weaver and Dr. Allen, it's a pleasure to have you here, along with Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Brighthall and Ms. DeGaios. Today's presentation is going to be on bridging Boone County's STEM gap. Now, when I did the background information on Boone County, it showed that Boone County is the third largest school district in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It has the highest test scores of any large, diverse school district. There are a total of 24 schools, an alternative school, 4 high schools, 5 middle schools, and 14 elementary schools. And this is in addition. This year we're going to be adding a virtual academy, and that'll start in the 2015-2016 school year. We serve over 20,000 students, and we employ over 3,000 employees within the district. And Boone County is a district that is proud of all their accomplishments within the schools in the areas of arts, academics, and athletics. Okay, so I have to back up a little bit. Initially, I know I've emailed you back and forth both a couple of times about my project and talked with Ms. DeGaios extensively. Boone County went through a lot of changes this year as far as district personnel and changes that needed to be made. So the original plan that I started with changing teachers' perceptions kind of had to be adjusted a little bit, because a lot of the work that initially I was supposed to do did not come to fruition. We had some of the meetings, and we talked about a lot of the science standards and how to connect the disciplinary ideas and the engineering standards and practices. So I had to think of where I was going to get some data from. So what I did was I switched my research questions around, and the first one is, why do we need the new NGSS standards? Okay, so I took the 4th grade K-Prep data and the Stanford 10 results to come up with some data to prove why we needed these new standards. So the next question was, how do I, as a science leader, begin to process of shifting the mindset of teachers to embrace new students, or the new standards? How do I work to bridge the gaps between the existing science standards and the new next generation science standards? How do I best meet the needs in training and teaching the staff at Goodrich to ensure the standards are fully understood and implemented? How do I work with the Boone County School District, SINSAM personnel at NKU, and other staff members through Boone Counties to change the teachers' perceptions of and misconceptions on what the new STEM and STEAM standards entail? How do I work to shift teachers' thinkings from the standards to practice, thinking of content, vertical alignment, and NASA's 5 E's, which are engagement, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation? So my particular role was to be a teacher leader for science at Goodrich Elementary. When I initially came to Mrs. Brighthall and I said, what do you want me to do for this project? She said, you're doing the science standards. So we have 8 professional development sessions, including a summer camp. Now, much of the stuff is still to come because we almost were pushed back a year, so it had to change a little bit. PLCs to study the new standards, which did take place over the past year, to implement the project-based learning into science instruction, which I've done a lot of that within my own classroom this year. Could change the timeline, as I said, based on financial and personnel commitments of the Boone County School District. We did have a training session on understanding by design in science, moving teachers towards student proficiency with the implementation of the new standards. And we had this was one of my huge projects, this was my baby, was the partnership that we had with Toyota Manufacturing. And if we had time, I'd like to take them out just to show them the STEM garden. But we partnered with parents, students, and teachers, so we partnered within the community to create a STEM-based vegetable garden for produce to include into our Backpack Buddies program. So what our Backpack Buddies program is for children in need who do not have typical weekend meals. We provide a meal for them, but typically that is processed and packaged food. So they're not getting any fresh produce into their garden. So now with the class that I had to take with Dr. Korshak, I had to also write a grant. So I chose to write a grant for Walmart. And I was awarded the grant to incorporate us going and getting fresh produce and whole grain foods for them. So that would incorporate into their healthy diet. And then the goal of this garden, we've already done 1 season of crops. The goal of the garden is to start providing fresh produce and fruits and vegetables for them. That's my huge baby in all of this. So this is what actually happened with the STEM garden. So the first phase, we worked with Toyota. We had fundraising efforts. Toyota did a lot of this within their corporation. They came up with all the wood for the raised flower beds. They recycled or upcycled tires from Toyota that they were no longer using. The kids spray painted them. They got donations of planters for the ground. They had plants donated. They had edging donated. They bought all the paver patios. And this was all the employees working together at Toyota, and they bought all of this to us. So the students created the workable garden with students. The students actually sat down, and each student in the class had the metric measurements of the garden. And so they drew up their idea of what the garden should look like for the 4th grade and for all the grade levels within Goodrich and the community in general. So they designed it, and from each classroom we picked a representative. And they sat and they looked through all of the different designs that they had, and they came up with one collaborative design. So it incorporated a little bit from each classroom. So one of the major things we did, it was all a grass area before. They put the paver patio so that handicap accessible children could get through there. The gates are all constructed so those students could get through with wheelchairs. One of my students wanted an arch that said "Our garden grows forever," so they created an arch for us. So they came and they did all of this woodworking for us, building the raised flower beds, which initially we planted flowers in, but as I get further down, we partnered with the UK Extension Office. So the volunteers all planned a day to work on the garden. Toyota paid for everything. They bought us breakfast, they bought us lunch, they bought us snacks, drinks, everything during the day. So on the volunteer day, the students, the parents, and the volunteers worked for a full day all together. The paver patio was installed, the raised flower beds built, tires painted, and edging installed. They planted seeds, flowers, and they also did a lot of weeding and cutting out of areas around trees. So then we partnered this year with the UK Extension Office. First, the seeds were planted. They planted lettuce, carrots, radishes, and turnips. Students were responsible for monitoring the raised flower beds. They had to go out there. Each class took a turn to water them. And eventually, we covered them with light bedding and then heavy bedding so that it basically created a greenhouse so those plants would grow quicker. And then we had a taste testing of produce. And the radishes and the lettuce, they yielded over 8 pounds worth of vegetables just in what they did. So it was real neat for them to taste it. And a lot of those kids had not tasted arugula or radishes before, so it was completely different for them. Got a lot of yucks, but we got a lot of, oh, this is good. So the next phase of this project is the Summer Gardening Club. The UK Extension Office is going to come, and they are going to partner together with students that have volunteered, and they're going to expand the garden to include different vegetables. They're harvesting the vegetables by students and master gardeners at the UK 4-H Extension Office, and then, as I said, that fresh produce will eventually go home. So you can see how all of the standards, the new science standards, have integrated into this. They had written responses to it, they had the math component of it, the engineering component, because they had to actually chart the vegetables, where they planted it. They were responsible for their little plot within the entire garden. The funny part of all of this is we have done so much work with gathering seed. Part of our grant was to get seed, some new things for the garden. We bought a shed. We had the PTA buy a shed for us, and we just got into it this last lesson, and we had a nice little rodent in there that ate through everything. So kind of interesting to deal with. It was like screams of bloody murder when the 4-H ladies were out there. So this is my first portion of the data. So this is where I wanted to go back and prove that we needed these new science standards. So back in the 2011 and 2012 school years for 4th grade only, you can see how students, this is the school, our district, and the state, are significantly outperforming the school and the district, or the state and the district. And then the same, distinguished is not so much, but you can see we have a high percentage of students that are falling in this category versus a low percentage of novice and a low percentage of apprentice, even though it's under the state boundaries and then above the district boundaries. So then we went on to 2014. So again, we have the same type of data. We have low percentage of novice, low percentage of apprentice, and then a high percentage of proficient and distinguished. And the same with the 2013-2014 school year. You see a little bit of a shift going on. We have a higher percentage of novice, higher percentage of apprentice, but we still have the majority of the students falling in the proficient category. We do have a good percentage falling in distinguished too, but still underneath the district and the state levels. So then I took it down into subgroup. In my paper is provided all the same 3 years, but I just pulled the most recent data. For 4th grade males, We have novice, we have a good percentage of novice and a good percentage of apprentice, but again, outperforming completely in the proficient and distinguished. Same holds true for the 2013-2014 school year for females. We have a percentage of novice, a percentage of apprentice, but a majority of our students are falling in proficient and then into the distinguished categories. Again, with Caucasian students, these are non-Hispanic. We have a little bit of novice, a little bit of apprentice, but again, outperforming. And outperforming, again, in free and reduced students. For the gap group, non-duplicated, we have a high percentage of novice, a good percentage of proficient, but again, we are showing a high percentage, apprentice, a high percentage of proficient, and then we have students still falling within the distinguished category. And then we took the norm reference test. I went back to 3 school years, so you can see completely where the school has outperformed the district and the state. The school underperformed this year, but still above the state averages. And then the Sanford 10 results for the most recent school year. The school was below the district and the state. So using all of this data, you can see with students, over a majority of students scoring in the proficient and distinguished categories, that we needed some new standards that were going to provide more rigor and incorporate all the different 5 E's from NASA's engagement within there. So when we looked, I asked Ms. DeCaios to help me with this, and we took all of the elementary schools in Boone County. So you can see that 10 of the 14 schools already scored 100% or at proficiency level within the county. Only the 4 schools, unfortunately, would fall on the bottom side, but only 4 schools out of that 14 already have met their benchmark. So this just qualifies more of my reasoning behind why we need new science standards to provide that rigor and engagement for the students. So within my own class, I did keep some results for the NGSS standards, incorporating them this year. So our structure and function unit, I have a mixed ability group. I have AM is the low performing students and PM is the higher performing students. So my math group, I teach math and science to them, but my science group in the morning, their pre-test was an average of 46 and their post-test was a 73. So incorporating those new standards, we saw a 27% overall increase. Our PM group, same thing happened. Pre-test of 66 and a post-test of 83, 17% overall increase. Structure and function with information processing, which is a completely new unit that I taught this year. It's a lot of body functions, how the brain functions, and how their lungs work, how the blood circulates through their system. And I actually was just a couple weeks ago, I went to the cadaver lab at UK with my daughter on a field trip. And I was able to tell them what the brain actually looked like and that I held a lung. And so I saw how all these things processed together. So it was exciting. The AM group, pre-test, they started out at 48%. Post-test was a 79% with a 31% overall increase. PM group, the pre-test was an 83, post-test was an 89, 6% overall increase. So obviously they understood this section a little bit better. The Waves and Information unit, the morning group, a pre-test of 50, post-test of 68. Still not passing, but overall an 18% increase. The PM group, they started at 68%, post-test of 89, 21% overall increase. Our Electricity and Energy unit, the pre-test is at 33, post-test 56. Again, you do not see the growth there, but we've got a 23% overall increase. Post-test, or PM group, pre-test 71% and post-test 92%, so overall they had a 21% increase. So you can see how these new standards are working and that they are engaging the students more. We also have the benefit of having a designated STEM teacher here. So everything that we do within our classroom, she also incorporates into her lessons. And she does a lot more of the engineering standards for us because she has the materials in the lab to do that. So for instance, I was surveying the students last week and I was asking them what they would like to see. First of all, I asked them if they like the standards now with the engineering component, and in every single one of them, all 46 that I teach said yes, automatically. They like the new standards. I also asked them what they think we could do differently, and some of the suggestions were, they came up with some great things. One of the students said to build ramps and include geometry concepts in it. So they had to build a ramp that had a 90-degree angle. They had to build a ramp that had an obtuse angle. They had to build a ramp that had an acute angle. So they're making those connections on how things can work in the real world, which is the point of all these STEM standards, which is what my next slide says. This was a quote that I included in my paper. The purpose of STEM initiatives at the national, local, and state and local levels is to bring together resources of the government in support of improving our education system. The private sector are making alliances to support authentic learning applicable to what is needed in the workforce. And educational institutions in collaborating on the best pedagogy and curricula to develop students who are prepared to meet the challenges of the future. Basically what we're doing here, college and career readiness. As teachers and students go through this process of embracing the new standards, it is imperative that students need to think scientifically, be engaged in science, and do science. The next generation science standards give us the tools and the connections to make it a reality for our students. So I felt that quote best hit the needs of what I've proved here in this presentation. So my further steps, what I'd like to do going forward is to get out into the school and find out how other teachers are incorporating the standards in their classroom routine, and to find out what challenges they've had this year of practice. Because initially this is just our practice year and learning of these new standards. Next year it goes into full play. Continue working on the STEM garden. Rewards will be seen for years to come, because we want to grow this and continue and expand it so that students are able to take advantage of this. Continually monitor data after full implementation of the NGSS into K-Prep and the Sanford 10. Now we are taking the Sanford 10 this year to the new science standards, but in the years to come, I'd like to continue that data and see how this works out for our school. Look for areas of strength and weaknesses to assist teachers to make stronger lessons. Work within our cluster groups. Now this was initially started at one of our first cluster meetings. They brought us in by cluster. So instead of it being an elementary only, middle school only, high school only, they had each one of the schools sit together. So we're on a campus that has Goodridge, Connor High School, and Connor Middle. And we originally did a listserv so that everybody could talk back and forth, but that never really happened because we split up and just went by grade level or school level only. So I think it would be a great idea to start a collaborative project between Connor High, Connor Middle, and Goodridge for the alignment, the vertical alignment of the NGSS. My vision is to have students in upper grades create projects that students at the elementary and the middle level could build for them. So if it was like a physics class and they wanted to test a ramp at a certain height, the physics students could create the project, but the elementary schools or the middle schools would help them build that project and show that standard. Continue attending the PLC meetings for unit development and assessment creation. So in a nutshell, that's my project, and this is, I promise you, this is not on my regular presentation, but this is me. The 3 phases of Mary Wilson during EDA 791 and 792. You know, in the beginning, I'm like, yeah, let's get this all started. And then as I'm writing my capstone, I'm going, what did I get myself into? And then today, at the end. That's it. Is there any questions?